I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're having a detailed look at this, the new Nissan Juke. Nissan's first new product here in Australia in a really long time. The Japanese brand has been soldiering on with the same lineup of crossovers for a number of years now, and while they've been pretty popular, it's always good to have new, fresh product, especially when you're pulling out of a pandemic and the market is just getting back to health. Hence why the Juke is so important. Now, you'll probably remember the Juke from its first generation, a really quirky, styled crossover that appealed to some, but probably alienated others through its really out there styling. I reckon this second generation product looks absolutely bang on. It still keeps some of the extroverted features, especially here at the front, but the overall style is smoothed out, perhaps a touch more conservative, but I think it all comes together really, really nicely. Now, interestingly, the Juke is very European in style. It's built in the UK, and Nissan basically thinks that Australians prefer European style of car in smaller segments, like small passenger cars or small SUVs. So this should be a good match for rivals like the Volkswagen T-Cross and the Toyota CHR, another Japanese crossover that drives in a very European way. So we'll find out whether the new Juke stacks up on those claims in today's video. We'll do our usual thing, jump inside, check out the backseat and the practicality, and then take this new small SUV out for a drive. But before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe below the video and the notification bell. It makes a big difference. All right, let's crack on. Jumping into the Juke, and it's immediate that this small crossover has had a big lift from the outgoing car. Nissan have brought the Juke right into the current day and age in terms of cabin technology, but also in terms of interior design, which is really good to see. And as you'd expect from a Nissan, the build quality feels absolutely tremendous. Everything is screwed together really, really well. But the new Juke is quite specification dependent on how nice the interior is. And while you expect all the normal stuff like seat upholstery changing based on how much you spend on a new car, what you probably don't expect is that the Juke has a plastic steering wheel even up to the 30 grand model. And I just think that that is out of this world. So if you want a leather steering wheel and a leather shifter, you need to go for either the ST-L variant, which Nissan thinks about half of people are going to buy, or the Ti, which is what I'm sitting in here. And given that this is what you touch every time you drive, at least I hope you're touching the steering wheel, then you do want that to be finished in leather. But you can let me know whether you agree down below. Speaking of leather, the Ti variant gets these really, really lovely seats with quilted leather and a bit of Alcantara here on the side inserts. But in fact, every Juke gets this coffin seat design, and every model has really nice comfy seats, which is really good. That being said, even on this top grade, they're manually adjustable. So if you're going to be constantly swapping drivers, you might prefer a rival that has electric seats and memory, for example. Now, looking further afield, up to the technology in the new Juke, it's made a huge jump from the really primitive screen in the previous car through to this much better infotainment system. And in fact, the Juke is the first Nissan SUV to bring this new infotainment to Australia. It's an 8-inch unit, it's mounted up here as a tablet. I know some of our viewers don't love the tablet style, but it is integrated quite nicely. I think the system is really nice and responsive. You've got some smart shortcut keys. It has wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, and higher grades start to bring in features like integrated sat-nav and digital radio. But on the whole, it works really well, as does the partially digital gauge cluster, which gives you a big digital speedo, compass, music info, navigation directions. So it's pretty fully featured indeed. And if you're an audiophile, the Ti model actually has the Bose Ultra Near Field system, the Personal Plus stereo with speakers up here in the headrest, which is pretty cool. The Mazda MX-5 has that as well, but that's the only other car I can think of with it, and it sounds really banging. In terms of material quality, it's generally good. So here in the Ti, we have Alcantara up here on the dash pad and in the door inserts, but all cars have some kind of soft touch there on the doors and on the dash. But notably, the top of the door and further up onto the dashboard is harder materials, but on the whole, it's pretty nice. And I appreciate that the ST-L and the Ti have soft surfacing down here where your leg comes to rest against the center console. It's also pretty practical. We've got two big cup holders. We have a tray ahead of the shifter, notably no wireless phone charging though. There's just two USB ports in the car, one for the front and one for the back. Deep central bin, finished in Alcantara, and decent sized door bins as well. So on the whole, I'm impressed. I think it's pretty good. You can let me know what you think down below. But now we're going to jump into the back seat. Here in the back is where the new Juke gets the benefit of slightly larger proportions than the outgoing car. Knee room in particular has increased, listen say, by about 6 centimeters, which is a difference you're really going to notice. And so for me, at 6 foot, I fit back here just fine. So my headroom is good. I've got another couple of inches. Legroom, same thing, fine. And toe room is pretty good as well, making the Juke a little bit more usable than the old car in terms of ferrying around for adults when you need to do that. That said, I think most people who buy this car are going to be using it, just with 1 or 2 seats up front filled and maybe using the back for maybe little kids or pets. But if you need to carry 4 adults, you can do that, and a 5th as well, because the hump in the floor isn't actually too bad. Now, in terms of amenities back here, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The seats themselves are reasonably comfortable. We do have 1 fast charging USB port, bringing the total for the car to 2, but no Juke variant gets rear air vents, which is really disappointing in Australia. There's kind of like this weird hole down here where they could have fitted air vents but didn't. And then the doors, they're hard, but you do still get that Alcantara finish in the center, which is quite nice, but no center armrest, all adding to that view I have that really this is a 2-seater car and you've got extra storage space here in the back. But speaking of storage space, what we need to check out next is the boot, and that's where we're going to go now. Here around the back of the Juke is probably where this crossover looks a little bit more mainstream, but I still think the design is really quite nice, well resolved, and definitely more appealing to my eye than the first generation car. But as always, these things are subjective, and you can let me know your opinion below. But the color looks great. This is a new color for Nissan called Fuji Sunset Red. It's a metallic, and it doesn't actually cost you anything more over the standard car, and in fact none of the colors on the Juke are solid. They're all metallic or pearlescent, which is cool, and I think we'll be seeing more of this red. Now, for the boot. The tailgate is manual on all of the variants, but it's very easy to open because we have these gas struts here, which is really great. There is quite a step down into the boot and a high load lip, so you will have to lift heavy suitcases up and out, but the boot itself is really big, 422 litres, which is good for the class, and a big 68 litre jump over the old car, which is considerable. And then underneath that boot floor, we also have a space saver spare, which is good peace of mind here in Australia. But that's about it in terms of other features. We don't have shopping bag hooks, for example, to put delicate stuff onto. It's just kind of a space for your stuff. But the door is nice and easy to close. I think anyone will be able to do that fine, so I don't really miss the fact there's not an electric tailgate operation. Next, we'll jump into the front seat of the Juke and take this new crossover for a drive. So, what is the new Juke like to drive? Well, it should theoretically be a significant improvement because just about everything about this SUV has changed over the old one, which was, fine, but nothing really to write home about in my opinion. The Juke has now been changed to ride on the Renault-Nissan Common Modular Family B platform, or CMF-B, and that's actually a new derivative of the CMF platform that's been around since about 2013. The B version for B segment, which is what the Juke sits into, B segment SUV in Europe, also sits under the new Renault Clio, the new Gen Clio that isn't in Australia yet, and the new Gen Captur that also isn't in Australia. So, for us down here, the Juke is the first to get it. And it's just stiffer and better than the old chassis that sat under the previous car. And you get to enjoy those benefits in just about every way, but namely in terms of ride and handling. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. First of all, we'll talk about the new engine, because the Juke downsizes to a 1-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. That is a format that's becoming increasingly common in this kind of car. And here in the Juke, it produces 84 kilowatts of power and 180 newton meters of torque. So certainly modest outputs on paper, but not far off what you'd be riding in terms of a Volkswagen T-Cross, for example, which has 85 kilowatts and 200 newton meters from its Turbo 3. Now, this engine is a family derivative of the 1.3-litre 4-cylinder that is pretty common in Renault cars and also in the Mercedes-Benz A-Class, so it's just a smaller version of that. But actually, I prefer the 3-cylinder. Firstly, it sounds better. You get this thrummy, bassy 3-cylinder note that's actually quite pleasing to the ear, and it's just really tractable. Plus, it's paired to a pretty well-tuned 6-speed dual-clutch automatic gearbox that I think just works well. And in terms of urban driving and then even faster stuff, the combination actually comes together much better than you might think looking at it on paper. And if you take this car for a test drive, you'll see it actually does have fairly plentiful low-down torque, and it overtakes with relative confidence. So don't let the 3-cylinder engine put you off considering the Juke. I actually think it's one of its best components. That's the only engine you can get in this SUV. There's no plans to bring out a bigger one, and there's no talk yet of a new Nismo version of the Juke like there was of the old version, but I think this is a really good place to start. But back to the benefits that the Juke's new platform brings. The main one is that the car is just a lot stiffer. It's got about 13% more torsional rigidity. It's about 22% stiffer at the front end, and so that just means that it turns in with a lot more sharpness than the old car, and also sits more flat and simply feels more cohesive as you're putting it through the corners. It feels really put together well, nice and stable. And another thing that adds stability is the fact that the wheelbase is up by over 10 centimeters on the old car, which is a significant difference. But the handling is improved, body roll is significantly decreased, but also Nissan have done a massive job at improving the steering of the car. I really haven't appreciated the steering feel in either the new Qashqai or the X-Trail, and the Juke is a lot better. It's still quite light, which is what you want in an urban car like this, but it's much more direct, it's pretty immediate off-center, and it just has a really nice connection to the front wheels, and grip levels are also pretty good in this car, so there's significant improvements on the handling front. The ride is also pretty nice. The secondary ride feels really well damped, and you're insulated from undulations in the road. The only problem is that the two higher grades, which are the ones that I would mainly consider, run on 19-inch wheels that just introduce a little bit more sharpness and a few more bumps into the cabin, and it can get just a little bit crashy over recurrent potholes that are sadly all too common here in Sydney. But I think out on country roads where it is more undulation and less potholes and less sort of speed bumps and stuff like that, the Juke's ride should be really good, but we'll check that out when we have one through for an extended stay. All in all though, this adds up to a significant improvement to the ride and handling characteristics of the car, to the point where I actually think it now feels pretty fun to drive. Even just in this standard non-Nismo, non-fettled form, it's actually quite a fun little thing, and quite a refined thing as well. Road noise and wind noise are decently well insulated, you're sitting in a comfortable seat with a good view out, and cabin quality is really lovely, and that's something you're able to enjoy as you go down the road. Another place where the Juke really steps up is in terms of its semi-autonomous safety tech, and this really comes as a result of significant tightening in the criteria for a 5-star crash rating these days. The old car didn't have all that much, but the new car comes absolutely filled to the gills. So we have AEB with pedestrian and cyclist detection on every car. We have lane keep assist on every car. We have blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert on every car. And just as I'm talking about it, someone pulls out right in front of me, and we get AEB kicking in. So it actually works. Back to what I was saying, all cars also get LED headlights, which is really good. And then as you start to step up the range, you get more premium features like a 360-degree parking camera and also tire pressure monitoring. So those are our detailed thoughts on the new 2020 Nissan Juke. What an improvement this crossover is on the first generation product, which really is the important thing. I like the way this vehicle drives, I like the way it looks, and if you're smart and go for the ST-L or the Ti versions, it's a very complete crossover for the money. And of course, the inclusion of all that safety technology is really good to see as well. But what do you think about the new Juke? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comment box. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.